Did the Saudi Crown Prince order the killing of Jamal Khashoggi? Hello, and welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Stephenie Foster of Smash Strategies, conservative commentator Valerie Greenfeld, and Kat Murti of Feminists for Liberty. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to have you ladies here. This week, it has become clear that Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed by Saudi agents in Turkey 2 weeks ago. NBC News picks up the story from there.
King Salman had denied knowing anything about the missing journalist, President Trump seeming to buy his explanation.
I don't want to get into his mind, but it sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers. Who knows?
But NBC News has learned from 3 sources that Saudi leaders are now discussing a plan to admit Khashoggi was killed there. One says it was during an interrogation that went wrong.
So, Stephenie Foster with Smash Strategies. What needs to happen next?
Well, I think a couple things. I mean, this is just a horrible story. I think we all now seem to agree across the aisle, across the world, that this journalist was killed in the consulate in Istanbul. So I think, however, we need to do a couple of things. One is really a very independent investigation to ensure that we understand the facts. Right now the Saudis and the Turks are doing an investigation together. It just doesn't seem like we're really going to get to the bottom of this if the Saudis are actually investigating something that they were involved in. We saw footage where cleaning crews went into the consulate right before the investigators got there. So these are really things that are very troubling. I think the next question, though, is then what do we do on a policy level? And there are a couple of things that Congress can do and the president can do. There can be sanctions against people who are on the Magnitsky list, which it's called. They can freeze bank accounts, look at how to look at arms sales in a different way. Yes, of course, we sell a lot of arms to the Saudis, but we don't have to sell quite as many. There's a lawsuit the Saudis don't like that harkens back to 9/11. So there are a lot of things that really are on the table as far as a policy response. And I think it's really, however, first important to get to the bottom of what happened and understand what culpability the government of Saudi Arabia has, if they have it. I think they do, but I'm going to say if they have it.
And Valerie Greenfeld, what's your point of view?
I appreciate the way that you made your statement because, we don't know what happened yet, and there's no guilt until it's been completely investigated. On the other hand, loss of life is always taken seriously, as you stated. But I think the Middle East is such a complicated place, and the United States, as you stated, the Saudi Arabia buys $450 billion a year from us, and they need us more than we need them. So we do have the level of ahead of them. On the other hand, they are helping us with Iran. They're helping Israel. They're doing a lot of business with Israel. And so the chessboard is very, very complicated at this time. And so I think, Trump right now is being very careful and taking step by step slowly to find out what are the facts first. But as you said, there are many different ways that we can make them accountable should we have to do that.
And Kat Murti with Feminists of Liberty, what's your opinion?
Yes, thank you. This is a disturbing case, but it's certainly not one that stands on its own. We've seen repeated cases of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia finding dissidents who are living outside of Saudi Arabia, and one way or another they end up in body bags or in prisons back in Saudi Arabia. This has been a common pattern. The reason that this is getting attention is because Khashoggi was slated to start working at the Wilson Center here in Washington, D.C. He is a journalist for The Post, so he was a known name amongst Western media. And as awful as this case is, and as much as I mourn for his family, in some ways this gives Americans an opportunity to understand how dangerous our so-called alliance with Saudi Arabia is. We look at this as something that's keeping stability in the Middle East, but it's not clear that it is. It is clear that Wahhabism that has been funded by Saudi Arabia has played a key role in terrorism, both within the Middle East and outside. And quite frankly, our major ties to them are both because of arms sales that we're not profiting that much from, and much more so because of their opposition to Iran. I think that the U.S. government is going to not want to cut ties, particularly at this point when we're looking at making sanctions on Iran in the first week of November, oil-related sanctions that we're hoping that the Saudi government will back us up on. But overall, I think that this is a dangerous alliance, one that is not benefiting us, and this is the time to really start looking at why we view them as an ally when they're by no means, we don't share the same values, and they're creating a lot of danger in the world.
I disagree. I agree that the Wahhabi ideal is a problem. I agree that actually that Jamal was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, as you said, is a big problem. But I think Saudi Arabia is giving the Middle East an opportunity to get away from Iran. Many, like the Israelis are now coming together with Saudi Arabia, and I think to give them a chance to get away from Iran and all of the problems that Iran is causing Israel is a huge deal, and it also could have an opportunity to lead to peace, to some kind of peace agreement.
I don't think that the Saudis are the key to peace. What I do think is true is that this is a very complicated chessboard in the Middle East, and I think that as the U.S. continues to get more and more involved, it becomes more complicated and more dangerous, and that's something that we need to seriously consider.
Stephenie, having worked in the State Department, what choices do you think the government really has?
Well, I mean, obviously diplomacy goes on both publicly in terms of public statements that get made and behind the scenes. I think one thing, and I would agree it's a complicated world, we all know that in that neighborhood. Again, looking at ways to, are there going to be sanctions lists? Is that something that gets enforced against people who were involved in this killing? Are there going to be ways to really temper the arms sales? I mean, the largest arms sales actually to Saudi Arabia happened in the Obama administration. So it's not as though having a tough conversation and really showing our muscle perhaps, it means you don't sell them arms. I mean, I think we need to be very clear about that. President Obama was certainly a proponent of human rights in the region. So I think those are things that we need to think about. I also think that it's one thing we need to ensure we have an ambassador to Saudi Arabia who's confirmed by the Senate and an ambassador to Turkey who's confirmed by the Senate. Right now we don't have those people, and our foreign policy is being conducted by, as far as I can tell, at a high level, Jared Kushner, and I think that is not really helping the situation move forward. I think we need to be very clear about that we use diplomats who are very seasoned in a very complicated world.
Thank you. I'm Heather Godwin, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.